Welcome to Torah on the Go. Whether you are sitting at home enjoying a cup of coffee, or you're in the car, or you're on the Stairmaster or the Peloton, we are glad that you're taking the time to learn with us right now. I'm sitting here next to my partner in so many ways, Rabbi Feinstein, and this is a special Thanksgiving episode that we want to talk to you about Thanksgiving and the Jewish relevance of Thanksgiving. It is a beautiful time.
The sanctity of cranberry sauce.
The sanctity of cranberry sauce. Before I became a rabbi, Rosh Hashanah was by far my favorite holiday. Since becoming a rabbi, Thanksgiving has risen up to be one of my most favorite holidays. And how could you argue with the sanctity of food and football? It just seems like
family,
and no
right?
Musaf, right? And no Musaf.
And no moose.
So we are at this point. Let's talk a little bit about Thanksgiving, and now we have a few people have submitted questions to us based on the first few episodes of podcasts, and we'll respond to those.
So, what's your family tradition for Thanksgiving?
We gather together at a park. We play football at 9 o'clock in the morning, family football. All the grandkids have to score a touchdown. My dad is the quarterback going in both directions. I always, everybody has to play two-hand touch, but I always tackle the kids myself. They always know that Uncle Nolan is going to play like a maniac. And then we go for an early dinner and at our house. What is your Thanksgiving tradition?
We like everyone else, we watch football on the TV. We wait around for the meal. But in more recent years, as the kids got older, we started taking it actually a little more seriously. We started treating the Thanksgiving table a lot like a Seder. Because I reminded the kids, this is the serious part of the holiday, there's a reason why we feel so at home in America. It's because the master story of America, which is the Thanksgiving story, is our master story. It's the same story, right? We came from a place of tyranny and of oppression. We faced an arduous journey, a dangerous journey. We arrived in a promised land that was difficult, that needed to be tamed, as it were, right? We felt that God's presence was with us. We received the help of the natives of the land. That's a little bit different than our story. And then we sat down to say thank you, and we sat down to say thank you in a fully Jewish way with food, right? There was a great scholar named Lebovitz Feinstein who once pointed out that it was a really good thing they chose a turkey. If they'd chosen a ham, we'd have been out of luck. But the idea that our story, the Passover story, which is our master story of an escape from oppression, an arduous journey, an arrival in a promised land, and the American story are so similar. That's one of the reasons why we feel so at home here.
And so much so, just to lend you some more strength in your argument, when our Exodus story finally concludes, it doesn't conclude at the end of the Torah, it concludes actually in the book of Joshua. We enter the land. And the first thing we do when we enter the land is we sit down and have Passover together. So just like when we arrived here, the narrative for the American narrative, of course, is that we arrived here and we had this meal of bounty and remembered where we came from and marked with a degree of gratitude how we had finally arrived to the place of promise. So too in the book of Joshua, we do the same thing with the Passover Seder. My family, we always have cholent on the table during Passover, but we always have cholent on the table no matter what.
Thanksgiving or Passover?
Thanksgiving, both. We always have cholent, and
the traditional cholent,
the traditional
that the
Thanksgiving
Pilgrim
cholent. That's right.
Ate,
that's right. And I love hearing
cholent. For those of you, we're not culturally familiar. So what is cholent? So cholent is a stew made out of meat, potatoes, beans, other kinds of things that you and Portland cement.
That's right.
That you cook overnight, Erev Shabbos, before the Sabbath comes, and you end up with a food that 4 bites will put you to sleep for a week.
and this was the food of the poor.
Right.
This was the food of the poor in Europe, in Eastern Europe, and now we come to America, and it ends up becoming a delicacy.
Yes,
my kids ask my mom to make their cholent.
Right.
It becomes the delicacy at the table. Like turkey is not a big deal, but cholent is what they sit down and they want to eat the cholent. So everybody, immigrant groups, and of course we are certainly one of them, bring with us an ingredient to add into Thanksgiving, which makes it so beautiful here in this country. I mean, when you talk about the beauty of this country and you talk about it's not just that everybody sits down at Thanksgiving and has this tradition and participates. It's that we all add something into the beautiful portrait that is America.
Yeah. So we are like your family. My family is passionately Zionist. My parents made Aliyah at one point, built a kibbutz in Israel, and then came home for lots of reasons. And so Israel has always been has always been part of the family. There's a big part of us that still lives there. My brother lives there, but our hearts live there. And the idea that there is a Jewish place where Hebrew is spoken, where holidays are celebrated, that idea of Zionism, a place where the Jewish heart flourishes. But at the same time, what Thanksgiving, and this is what I do with my kids, is what Thanksgiving represents, is that there's always been a diaspora. There's always been a periphery outside of Israel where Jews have found a home and created some of the most wonderful expressions of our culture, and that America is a unique diaspora. It is unique in the quality of welcome that it offered us. It's unique in the quality of safety, security, and possibilities that it's offered. And the story's not done yet. So for us, Thanksgiving becomes, in many ways, a celebration of this idea that we have two homes in the world, and that having two homes in the world is not a bad thing. And each one offers us different opportunities to express what is deepest in our hearts. And the Thanksgiving celebration, although, with a kosher turkey that costs 17 times what a draped kosher turkey costs, actually, my family now, we have the American curse. We have vegans, vegetarians, gluten-frees, people who don't eat meat, people who do eat meat, people who like the cornbread this way. So there's about 8 meals on the table at the same time. But we sit down and talk about the gifts of this diaspora and what this moment, what this place in the world has offered us.
For a long time in Jewish history, we had no welcome homes.
Right.
We had no homes that welcomed us. And now we have two. One is of our own making, and one is this beautiful land. And we are fortunate to live in this time with all of the challenges of this moment of 2023. We are still lucky to live in the time that we live. So, as an expression of gratitude to our community, we have asked for questions from time to time during the podcast, and we've received 2. And so I want to give a shout out to Joel Batalski from Dallas and to Arnie Porath, who have both submitted questions. Brave people. And let's begin with Joel's. Joel asks a series of questions. At this point in your life, what gives you most meaning?
An easy question, huh? What gives us most meaning? What gives me most meaning? Well, first of all, my family, of course. I mean, we have a beautiful grandchild and one on the way. And watching my children grow up has been a great joy, and my closeness with my wife. And my dad is still in the world. My mother-in-law is still in the world. They're in their 90s. That's great. The group of friends that we've gathered around us is a tremendous sense of satisfaction. And I still have an innate, deep sense of wonder at the way that Jewish life in this place and this time has developed. It's just, to me, just an incredible thing that we're still here. Right? You remember I've told this story many times. In 1966, earlier, 1963, 64, Look magazine was the second biggest news magazine in the country, and they published a very famous cover article, April 64, a cover article called "The Vanishing American Jew." And they said, listen, by the 1980s, Jewish life in America will be attenuated significantly, and by 2000, there'll be no Jews left in America. Well, Look magazine is gone, and we're still here. And the question is why? And I still have a very deep sense that God isn't finished with us yet, that we have something to contribute to American culture, something to contribute to human consciousness, and that there are great cultural possibilities built in to Jewish life. I see these all over, and I know all the statistics, so don't tell me about disaffiliation and alienation and assimilation. I know those statistics, of course I do. But I'm still so impressed at how many new expressions of Jewish life, faith, culture, wisdom keep growing around us, And that gives me a great sense of hope and a great sense of meaning.
So I also would start with family. And I actually think, not dissimilar from what you said, I think that I find a lot of promise in my children. I'm fascinated in the sense that they're becoming teenagers. One is already a teenager.
God help you.
That's right. And everybody warns you that these are going to be difficult times, rocky waters ahead. And they are rocky. And at the same time, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
Because you finally see this child that you've raised starting to become a human being. And they have beliefs, and they have a voice, and they have a will. And it is easy in this moment to look at younger generations and say, what do they know? I actually think looking at the youngest generations, my own children, the children in our day school, in our ECC, in our religious school, the children in our community, the Jewish children in our community, I think there's a great deal of promise for our future. And it's inspiring, and it lends me meaning. And so we're going to move on to Arnie's question. It's clear from the narrative when God asks why the woman ate from the forbidden fruit, she answers, the serpent made me do it. When God asks the same question of the man, he answers, she made me do it.
Right.
A glaring statement about not taking responsibility.
Yes.
So how do we learn responsibility? And I have to, I'll ask you the question, and then I'll perhaps reframe Arnie's question a little bit in the way that I answer it. But from where then do we learn a sense of responsibility from the book of Genesis, which has been the topic, which is our topic for this entire year?
Right. So the story that he's referring to, of course, is the Garden of Eden. And the woman takes the fruit. She's tempted by the serpent. She eats the fruit. She gives it to the man. The man eats the fruit. God is taking a walk or a jog in the garden. It's Friday afternoon. He's got his UCLA sweatshirt on.
Outside of the UCLA sweatshirt, that's quite literally the way the text reads. It's not very different.
Not making
right.
that up,
yeah.
right? And and the God asks the man the question, which I think is the central question of the Torah. It's the central question of the tradition. Ayeka, where are you? What are you doing? Where are you going? And the man answers God, but it's not really an answer. His answer is, I heard you in the garden and I was ashamed. He doesn't answer the question, where are you or where are you going? He just says, I was ashamed. And he says, did you eat of the fruit? And the man says, yeah, I did, but she gave it to me. It's the birth of man as wuss, because you'd hope he'd stand up and say, you're damn right I ate from the fruit. I wanted what that fruit would give me. But he can't do that. He's terrified to stand in front of his creator, as most of us are terrified to stand in front of our creator and give an account of ourselves. And he does something which is so regrettable, but it's so human, which is to pass the buck, as it were. And she does the same thing. That's the story that he's referring to. And it's regrettable, but it's a picture, it's a portrait of human beings. I mean, it's not lovely, which I think is so interesting by the tradition that the scripture would give you a picture of human being, which is not admirable, not lovely, right? But it's part of us. It's a mirror held up to that part of us. And because your response is to say, oh, why? That's exactly what you're supposed to be able to feel at that moment, because you're trying to push a person to say, it's not the person you're meant to be. So it's just interesting, at that moment in the narrative, man discovers his morality. He discovers right from wrong, and he's ashamed of himself, which is what the fruit gave him, or at least what growing up gave him. He's ashamed of himself, but he hasn't yet learned to stand up for himself and to say, I did this and I take responsibility. And I think the lesson of that story, I'll answer your question eventually, the lesson of that story is exactly that, which it takes a lifetime to learn how to stand up and say, I take responsibility for the choices I've made. I am the sum of my choices. And I take responsibility, and now I'm going to do something about it. And the rest of the Torah is there to teach us how to do that. That's the purpose of the rest of the Torah.
So I would reframe Arnie's question. I had a teacher, Reb Mimi Feigelson, who I learned a tremendous amount from. Wonderful. And she taught us a midrash from the Mea Shiloach, 18th century Hasidic teacher, brilliant Torah scholar, who reads the text a little bit differently. He doesn't read the text as, I got it from her. when God says, who gave you this apple? And Adam says, she gave it to me. He reads it as, she gave it to me, meaning to say, it is in fact Adam's responsibility to eat when his wife offers him the apple in a sense of terror. His wife eats the apple, her eyes are opened. She looks terrified. She can suddenly see the world the way that the world looks, not through the Garden of Eden lens. She can see all of the imperfections. She can see all of the danger. She can see suddenly that the world is not going to be Eden forever. And she hands the apple to Adam, and Adam has a choice. He can allow her to live in that world, and he can remain, or he can join her. Mm-hmm. He can join her with all of the frailty and to understand that by eating this apple, you accept wisdom and you also accept death. You accept that this will not go on forever. Mm-hmm. And he chooses to stand alongside her in that moment. He chooses that he will not allow her to go through this alone. And so we can read the story both ways. We can read the story and say this is a human flaw. Mm-hmm. This is a mistake, not accepting responsibility. Or perhaps, according to the Mea Shiloach, it's the greatest expression of responsibility to say, you're going through this moment. I can see it in your face.
Right.
I will not allow you to go through it alone.
Right. Well, the other way to read it, it's parallel to that, is you remember that when he was alone in the garden, God said, Lo tov heyoz adam levado.
Right.
You shouldn't be alone. So God creates this woman, and the man waxes poetic and says, Zot apam, this is the one I've been waiting for. She eats the fruit. He knows she's going to die. He's holding the fruit. It's got a bite mark in it. He has a choice.
Right.
If he eats, he will die with her. He will alienate himself from his creator, but he'll bond with his wife. If he doesn't eat, she dies, and he goes back to being alone. So he keeps his faith with his creator, but he alienates himself from his wife. So the choice is between loneliness or death. And the Talmud elsewhere will talk about that choice, either loneliness or death, and said you'll always make the choice for death because loneliness is a state of being which is worse than death. And he chooses his wife, which is a kind of, in that way, it's a courageous and a romantic choice, as it were, and kind of a beautiful choice, and still something we have to learn how to live with, right?
That's right. And to bring the whole episode together in the Jewish Thanksgiving that we call Passover, we open the door to our home. We acknowledge that loneliness is a challenge that most of us are not up to the task. We open the door to our home and say, nobody should be alone tonight. All those who are hungry, please come in and join us. Mm-hmm. On Thanksgiving is also a time where we welcome a lot of people around the table. We make more than enough food for an army. And we try to shove it down each other's throats and in an effort to show how grateful we are. We try to be together. Togetherness is a big theme of Thanksgiving.
Right.
I want to thank everybody who joined us. I also want to thank Joel and Arnie for joining us. And if you have any questions that you'd like for Rabbi Feinstein and I to address, we encourage you to send them our way. You can go to our website, vbs.org/podcasts, and you can submit your questions for us. We look forward to engaging with your questions and your learning. And I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your turkey and enjoy your cholent.
Could you pass the cornbread, please?
That's right.
Have a happy holiday.